I took the sheets off and I caught him.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the most sensational times people sought devastating revenge for an injustice.
Many were implicated in war crimes, and the Nakam now plan to kill them.
Number 20, Marvin Heemeyer, the Killdozer creator. For years, Heemeyer had clashed with people in Granby, Colorado, including neighbors, town officials, and the press. After one last injustice, he sold off his property and spent 18 months turning his bulldozer into a weapon. Heemeyer reinforced it with concrete and steel, fitted video cameras and slots for firearms, and filled the interior with supplies. In 2004, Heemeyer drove the vehicle, known as the Killdozer, through Granby, destroying properties belonging to those who wronged him.
He was upset that a batch plant was built next to his muffler shop.
But no one expected this.
This included the town hall, the concrete plant, and the home of the former mayor. No one perished from the rampage, but it's believed Heemeyer caused around $7 million in damage. After the bulldozer got stuck in debris and was badly damaged, Heemeyer took his own life.
Did he actually say he was going to take a bulldozer and armor it?
Well, he didn't say he was going to armor it. He said, I'm going to take a bulldozer and to the town.
Number 19, Olga of Kiev, the saint who destroyed a tribe. In 945, Igor, the Prince of Kiev, confronted the Drevlian tribe after they stopped paying him a tribute. After getting money and leaving, Igor went back to get more, only to be murdered by them.
Кто меня убьет? Зачем? Эх ты, месяц всего. Дурак.
Igor's wife Olga then took over the regency of Kievan Rus. The Drevlians sent multiple parties of ambassadors to take advantage of the chaos. Instead, each group was lured in by Olga before being slain. She then went to Igor's tomb in Drevlian's territory to hold a funeral. While the tribe paid their respects, Olga had thousands of them killed.
Сжечь город! И насыпать высокую могилу Игорю.
Over the course of a year, her army wiped out the remaining Drevlians and set their settlements ablaze. Olga later converted to Christianity and was canonized as a saint. Number 18, Julius Caesar, from hostage to tormentor.
Certainly in relation to the commanders of the ancient world, their great thing really is to plan the overall strategy, to get the army to the place it should be, to choose the battlefield.
Before he became the ruler of the Roman Empire, Julius Caesar traveled from Rome, Italy to Rhodes, Greece to study oratory. However, pirates attacked and took the 25-year-old for ransom. But when Caesar heard how much they were asking for him, he laughed. Not because it was an impossible figure, but for being far too low.
Your time is up, Roman.
I'll fight one of you for another day.
Instead, Caesar told them to substantially increase it due to his status. For his 38 days there, he threatened the pirates that he would crucify them. Yet none believed him. After his release, Caesar gathered an army and a fleet. They found the pirates at the island they had held him at and arrested them. Caesar followed through on his promise by executing them all.
Rome is waiting, Caesar. You are triumphant. Cornelia's waiting. As for Rome...
Number 17, Ken McElroy, The Vengeance of Skidmore.
If they catch somebody, and he's tried, and he's found guilty, would you feel that justice has been done?
No.
For decades, Ken McElroy terrorized the town of Skidmore, Missouri. He was accused of committing many crimes, including thieving livestock, arson, animal cruelty, and burglary. McElroy also assaulted an underage girl, who he later married after a reign of terror against her family, including slaying their dog.
Do I believe that there was bad things that Dad did? Yes. He wasn't a perfect man by far.
In 1981, after appealing his conviction for the attempted murder of the local shopkeeper Ernest Bowenkamp, McElroy went on a rampage of harassment against Bowenkamp's supporters. The town was done with him. As McElroy sat with his wife in his truck, he was fatally shot multiple times. While there were dozens of witnesses to the slaying, no one said anything. To this day, the perpetrator has never been identified.
Ironically, it was this shooting back here that led to the final shooting right here at the bar, a matter of 50 feet away.
Number 16, Alan Ralsky, The Poetic Spam Revenge.
Email will always surpass everything you've ever seen or heard about. Media, any kind of media, email is still king.
No one likes junk mail, whether email or postal. Sure, for every coupon book you might want, there are numerous advertisements for products you'll never use. One of the biggest scourges of sending this was Alan Ralsky. In his spamming prime, he was reportedly sending 1 billion emails a day. But in 2002, Ralsky had an interview with the Detroit News. The article was then shared online, along with the address for his new property. People then added Ralsky to every mailing list they could find, flooding his home with junk mail and giving him a taste of his own medicine.
Okay, I had to have made some kind of a dent by now. Oh, come on!
In 2009, Ralsky was sentenced to jail for 4 years for various felonies, including fraud, spamming, and money laundering. Number 15, Jeanne de Clisson, taking to the seas against the French.
Gentlemen, hoist the colors.
How there hasn't been a blockbuster biopic on her life, we'll never understand. Jeanne was a Breton French noblewoman who was married to Olivier IV de Clisson. In 1343, Olivier was executed by King Philip VI of France for apparent treason. After showing their sons their father's head on display, Jeanne sold the family estates and began her plan of piracy. She gathered ships, with the main one called My Revenge, and started attacking French vessels and aiding the English. Jeanne's feats earned her the nickname the Lioness of Brittany. Eventually, the French sank My Revenge, causing Jeanne and her sons to be adrift for days. But she continued pirating for years more. Number 14, Udham Singh, the retaliator of a massacre. In 1919, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre took place in India, with British soldiers firing on protesters, taking the lives of up to 1,500 and injuring as many as 1,200.
They've had their warning. No meetings.
Singh was a revolutionary who fought for India's independence from British colonialism. While in London, England, he planned his revenge against Michael O'Dwyer, who was the lieutenant governor of the Punjab during the terrible event. In 1940, O'Dwyer, who had ties to pro-Nazi groups, was speaking at Caxton Hall. Singh walked in with a firearm concealed in a book.
Mr. Dwyer!
He approached O'Dwyer and shot him, ending his life and injuring several others. Singh was arrested, yet was defiant during the court case for his beliefs. He was found guilty and executed. Number 13, Genghis Khan, obliterating an empire from history.
With his wife rescued, it was now that Genghis first emerged as the brutal mass murderer of history.
In 1218, Genghis looked to trade with the neighboring Khwarezmian Empire and sent an envoy of several hundred merchants. However, the governor of Otrar, Inalchuk, who was related to the Khwarezmian ruler Muhammad II, arrested the caravan for treason and executed them.
This was to be the complete destruction of an entire tribe.
Aiming to avoid a war and get revenge against Inalchuk, Genghis sent ambassadors to Muhammad II. One was executed by the ruler, while the others were shaved and sent back to Genghis. With that, the Mongol ruler was livid. Genghis took most of his army and decimated the Khwarezmian Empire, assassinating Inalchuk along the way. The Mongols destroyed Khwarezmian cities and took the lives of millions of people as they wiped an empire from history. Number 12, the Dachau Liberation Reprisals.
They didn't have food to eat. The weather was cold, wintertime, so they were gone.
In 1945, the U.S. soldiers approaching the infamous Dachau concentration camp had no idea of the horror they would witness. In the weeks leading to the liberation, prisoners were shipped to Dachau as they started hiding the evidence of what had happened. As the U.S. fought the SS soldiers to surrender, they discovered thousands of bodies in piles, some shoved into train boxcars, and the extremely malnourished and abused survivors.
The smell was horrible. We thought, golly, what is this? You know, somebody suggested that the Germans were using some kind of poisonous gas.
Many of the U.S. soldiers couldn't wrap their heads around the atrocities and were filled with unbridled rage. The exact details of what went down are hazy. However, it's believed the U.S. soldiers and some of the prisoners took the lives of between 35 and 50 SS guards. Number 11, the 47 Ronin, avenging their master's memory.
He wants Kira dead, and his vision depends on organization and stealth.
One of Japan's most famous legends, the tale of the 47 Ronin is actually rooted in reality. After their master, Asano Naganori, was forced to commit seppuku in 1701 by the ruthless Kira Yoshinaka, the former samurai spent over a year biding their time until Kira's forces believed they were not a threat. Then they struck. In 1703, the Ronin attacked Kira's residence, fighting many of his retainers.
I take a vow before you that I will not rest until justice is done.
Eventually, they located Kira and offered to let him commit seppuku. However, he couldn't do it. So their leader, Oishi Yoshio, did it for him and took Kira's head to Asano's grave. Each Ronin was sentenced to death for their revenge, but was given the choice to commit seppuku, which they all took.
They weren't corrupted by court life, and they were probably really rough country men who just would not take that sort of treatment and insult.
Number 10, Pierre Picot, the real Count of Monte Cristo.
Just as God has freed it from my heart. And what has replaced it? Revenge.
The Count of Monte Cristo is one of the greatest revenge stories in literary history. And though it is a work of fiction, the main character, Edmond Dantes, is said to be based on a real man named Pierre Picot. A 19th century shoemaker from southern France, Picot was falsely accused of being an English spy by his alleged friends. Following years of forced servitude, Picot was released, and after some careful plotting, murdered the 3 men who had betrayed him. He was particularly ruthless in dealing with Lupien, the man who had married his former fiancée. Picot tricked the man's children into lives of crime before finally stabbing their father to death.
How did you ever call yourself my friend?
We were friends, Edmond.
Number 9, Alexander Alec Turner, the ex-slave who got even. Reminiscent of a real-life version of Django, Alec Turner was born into slavery on a Virginia tobacco plantation in 1845. At a young age, he was taught to read and write in secret by the plantation owner's granddaughter. They were eventually caught, however, and Turner was badly beaten and whipped. Eventually able to escape at the start of the Civil War, Turner joined the Union Army. In 1863, Turner returned to his old plantation with his regiment and personally shot and killed his former overseer.
Now, all you black folks, I suggest you get away from all these white folks. Not you, Stephen.
He survived the war, eventually settling on a farm in Vermont, appropriately named Journey's End.
He's the guy who's the talk of the town with the restless gun.
Number 8, Nakam, the Jewish Avengers. Understandably, many people were dissatisfied with the result of the Nuremberg trials, where only 24 individuals were indicted. And so a group formed named Nakam, shortened from Dam Yehudi Nakam, or Jewish blood will be avenged, with the goal of seeking their own form of justice. The group poisoned 3,000 loaves of bread that were being sent to an American POW camp, intended for former SS members.
I don't know how many, but what I know is that the American army has mobilized all the ambulances, and they had thousands.
Over 2,000 prisoners were reportedly made ill, but to the retroactive disappointment of former Nakam member Yosef Harmatz, there were no confirmed fatalities. According to some members, however, the group had originally desired to kill 6 million Germans by poisoning the water supplies of the country's main cities.
To kill 6 million Germans, that's even insane to say that. Which 6 million? Where? How?
Number 7, Frank Eaton, the man who avenged his pa. Born in the mid-19th century in Connecticut, Frank Eaton moved to Kansas with his family when he was 8 years old. Around this time, his vigilante father was killed by 6 ex-Confederate soldiers. A family friend told Eaton, quote, "My boy, may an old man's curse rest upon you if you do not try to avenge your father." Frank began training, quickly earned the nickname Pistol Pete, and was said to be faster on the draw than Buffalo Bill. As the story goes, he managed to seek out and kill 5 of the murderers before he turned 30, with the last, John Ferber, escaping Eaton's wrath only by dying before Eaton could get to him. Number 6, Aaron Burr, the vice president who'd had enough. We've heard of political rivalries before, but nothing quite like this. Both Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr were big players on the political stage at the turn of the 19th century. Burr had gone up against Thomas Jefferson for the presidential nomination, but lost, thanks in part to Hamilton's influence.
The choice between Jefferson and Burr fell to the House of Representatives, controlled by Hamilton's party called Federalists. Now, Aaron Burr had to make a very hard decision.
A few years later, Burr ran for governor of New York, only to once again see his ambitions dashed by the counter-efforts of Hamilton, who campaigned aggressively against him. Fed up, Burr, who was still vice president at the time, challenged Hamilton to a duel. The pair met in Weehawken, New Jersey, and Hamilton was mortally wounded.
He aims his pistol at the sky.
Number 5. Buford Pusser, the sheriff who walked tall.
Yes, I was beaten and robbed on the Mississippi and Tennessee state line, and of course the local law enforcement wasn't doing anything about it, and that's when I decided to run for sheriff on there.
During his time as sheriff of McNairy County, Buford Pusser waged a one-man war on crime, focusing primarily on the state line mob, which operated along the border of Mississippi and Tennessee. Naturally, this did not sit well with the gang, who severely wounded Pusser and murdered his wife in a drive-by assassination attempt. Pusser's ensuing quest for revenge inspired a trilogy of films in the 70s and a 2004 remake starring Dwayne Johnson.
I grew up in this town. People used to walk tall in this town. They wouldn't have traded the mill for a crooked casino.
Though the exact details are largely obscured in mystery and rumor, various authors and local law enforcement have suggested that Pusser had a hand in the killing of 3 of the 4 men he accused of being behind his wife's death.
People are looking for maybe a hero type, somebody that stood up for the underdog.
Number 4. Carl V. Erickson, the retiree who really held a grudge. High school can be a difficult time, particularly if you aren't considered one of the so-called popular kids. Carl Erickson experienced this firsthand when he was the victim of a cruel prank. While the exact details of the incident are unclear, it did involve a jockstrap being placed on Erickson's head in front of a group of students. Erickson blamed Norman Johnson for the prank and took the idea that revenge is a dish best served cold a little too far. He waited over 50 years to get even, confronting Johnson and killing him in his home in 2012. Both men were in their 70s, and Erickson was given a life sentence for his crime. Number 3. Jared Harris, the avenging amateur tattoo artist. Prison is a rough place in general, but for those who've been convicted of crimes against children, it is living hell. Back in 2006, Anthony R. Stockelman was sentenced to life in prison after assaulting and murdering the young Katie Coleman. To the ignorance of officials, Stockelman was placed in the very same prison as Katie's older cousin Jared Harris, who was serving time for burglary. From what investigators could put together, it seems that Harris cornered Stockelman and, with the help of other inmates, tattooed the words found on the inmate's forehead the next morning. The script in question, Katie's Revenge. Number 2. Lorena Bobbitt, the knife-wielding wife who refused to be the victim anymore.
I will wake up shaking and scared, and I will have nightmares.
We've heard of volatile marriages before, but this case caught the attention of the international community. According to Lorena Bobbitt, she'd suffered various forms of abuse at the hands of her husband for years, and on the night that she finally snapped, he had forced himself on her. That was June 23, 1993, a date ex-husband John Wayne Bobbitt is unlikely to ever forget.
My mind went blank. I could barely walk, could barely breathe.
While her husband slept, Lorena took a knife from the kitchen and cut off his appendage, drove several miles, and threw it into a field. It was eventually found after an extensive search and reattached during an over 9-hour operation.
It took a long time to actually to get to where I am right now. It's really psychologically.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Aku Yadav, the accused predator who met mob justice. For over a decade, Indian gangster Aku Yadav, real name Bharat Kalicharan, terrorized locals in a slum outside the city of Nagpur. He sexually assaulted over 40 women and killed at least 3 people. After a mob burned down his house, Yadav had the police, who were in his pocket, arrest him for his own protection. In response, hundreds of women stormed the courtroom where his bail hearing was being held and stabbed him to death. The women openly admitted responsibility, and while some were arrested, the police eventually backed down and released them. Have you ever gotten revenge for something in your life? Was it instant or did you play the long game? Let us know your story below. Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.